Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so my name is Ing. So, like on the behalf of the Carbon Trust, it's my absolute pleasure to have everybody on today's session. So for today's sessions, there are main two agenda. So first, we will start with a masterclass, which is about the circular economy and business model innovation for net zero transition, which will present by our speaker Prannoy for roughly 75 minutes. And then we will transition into a panel discussion that is about decarbonizing the tech and telecommunications sector, the challenges, opportunities, and the road ahead. And we will have our two leading experts in this field, and also from the leading telco company Axiata and CelcomDigi. So yeah, so without further ado, I will hand over the stage to Prannoy.
Thank you very much, Ying, and a very good afternoon to all of you. My face might be familiar. I have been delivering masterclasses and workshops for the past 2 years at the National Climate Governance Summit. So a pleasure to advance the topics. So as you can see, this year's topic is a bit advanced, but I hope you will all find it insightful and you will start to implement circular business practices in your businesses as well. So as you can see, the topic for the masterclass is circular economy and business model innovation for net zero transition. So some of the keywords, as you can see, is circular economy. You all might be familiar with it, and the first thing that might be coming to your mind is, the plastic circularity, but it has much more than plastics actually. Every business has circularity role to be played. Next term over here is business model innovation. So as you know, most of our businesses currently are very linear. Circularity is not there, but how we can have innovations in our business model so that we can integrate circularity going forward in our businesses. And finally, the term net zero transition. I believe a lot of corporates that you are representing have committed to net zero. If not many, at least few of you have committed to net zero. As a nation, Malaysia has committed to be net zero by 2050. So how circular economy, business model innovation will contribute towards achieving net zero as corporates as well as a nation. So that's what we will be discussing in this session. We have around 75 minutes or so there are quite a lot of agenda to be covered. The first is, hopefully I don't have to give introduction about Carbon Trust, you will all know already, but in case someone doesn't know, we'll quickly go through that. Then we will give you a context as well, what the net zero transition journey typically looks like for a corporate, and where exactly today's topic sits into or fits into that net zero transition journey. Then we will deep dive into what exactly net zero economy is or circular economy is. So we'll go through definitions and also the practical aspects of that. And how can a circular economy enable net zero transition? So we'll look into actual implementations of circular economy principles and real live examples of how some of the companies have implemented circular economy specifically in two sectors. One is mobile devices and ICT sector, and also in the footwear and apparel sector. So we will look at the case studies, how the companies in this sector are implementing circular economy. And finally, how to approach circular economy, what are the frameworks that you can use for your own organization to implement circular economy in your own organization. So we'll look at those approaches and the frameworks as well. So let's start with the first two topics. So may I know who haven't heard of Carbon Trust before? All right, I see one hand. That's a great progress from last year. Last year when I asked, there were not many people who knew about Carbon Trust, so that's a good thing. But just to recap, we are a global advisor on a mission to accelerate our move to a decarbonized future. We are a mission-driven organization, and we call that because we don't have any investors. Only board members just take £1 every year. Every year we are evaluated based on how much decarbonization we have brought into the society and to the economy. And we provide end-to-end services, as you can see, from insight, strategy, action, and impact. I'm not going to go into a lot of details. And we have supported more than 3,000 organizations, We have supported corporates, businesses, as well as government around the globe in accelerating their journey towards net zero. And globally, we have more than 400 experts and consultants. So what a net zero journey actually looks like in any corporate context. It's a long journey, multiple year journey. It doesn't happen in 1 year. And nowadays, transition planning or transition roadmap planning is becoming quite common among corporates. Stakeholders are expecting you to publish your plans, how you're going to transition to a net zero. And that includes a lot of steps. It starts with analysis and insight. I'm sure you all have heard about the ISSB disclosure, which are going to be mandatory in Malaysia as well as other neighboring countries as well. You guys must be preparing for those disclosures. So a lot of clients start with those disclosures and also the footprinting, scope 1, 2, and 3 footprinting. I believe a lot of you have started to do that because that was the topic I covered in my very first workshop here at NCGS 2 years back. And if your organization is very product-centric, you're selling a lot of products, then we have seen a lot of clients starting with a product carbon footprint as well, which kind of links to your scope 1, 2, and 3 as well. And once you have that analysis and insight, it's about target setting. Best way to set a target is science-aligned target for across your scope 1, 2, and 3. Then you do a feasibility analysis, how feasible it is for you to achieve those targets based on the sector you are in, based on the countries where you are operating. And then there is something called beyond value chain mitigation, which is the role of carbon offsets on your journey towards net zero. And then it's about strategy and planning, how you're going to roadmap your decarbonization journey. Then financial decarbonization, you have to look at from the capex and opex and lifetime cost point of view as well, not just the carbon. So you bring those together and decide what you are going to do first. And then is the risk mitigation and opportunity. That's where the circular economy and the business model innovations fits in. So how you're going to strategize your new business and how you're going to mitigate the risk that they're going to come in future. So that's what we'll be doing, deep diving into this session later today. And then is the management and implementations. Once you have plan on paper, you have to implement it. So you need to have a proper metrics and KPIs on how you're implementing it, whether you're progressing well on your plans or not. I'm sure you all know about the green financing, available sustainability-linked loans and bonds that you can capitalize as well on your journey towards net zero. And for most of your emissions might be coming from your suppliers and maybe downstream consumers as well. So supplier engagement and multi-stakeholder engagement as well are crucial on your journey towards net zero. And finally, once you have done all the hard work on all these steps, it's about annual reporting and disclosure that you have to publish in your annual sustainability report, aligned to international standards like ISSB, GRI, Transition Planning Task Force, as well as CDP and all. And if you have raised green instruments, then you have to have a impact report as well to be disclosed every year. And finally, it's the assurance and labeling to give that credibility to the numbers and the claims that you're making in your sustainability report. So that's the comprehensive net zero transition journey. So in the first year, 2 years back, we have already covered scope 1 and 2 and scope 3 footprinting. Then last year, we covered about target feasibility modeling. And also we covered a bit about supplier engagement program. If some of you attended, you might remember from last year. And this year, we are going to talk more about in the strategy and planning, how you're going to mitigate risk and capitalize on opportunities by adopting circular economy practices. So that's what we are going to do, and this is where today's topic fits into the entire net zero journey. All right, so let's start to deep dive into the topic of circular economy. So climate change and sustainability requires radical decarbonization across our value chain and supply chain. And what it means is basically we need to decouple our growth, which is the economic growth, from the environmental impact and the resource consumption and the waste as well. So traditionally, economic growth is kind of linked to more extraction, more consumption of the raw materials, more wastage. So we need to decouple that in our circular or net zero journey going forward. And this represents a unique opportunity actually for the businesses as well as for your customers as well. And that's what we will look into, how this is an opportunity for the businesses to adopt circular economy practices. So when I just mentioned about decoupling the economic growth with the environmental impact, this is kind of not on a scale, but this is a graph from UNEP where they highlighted resource decoupling, which means how the economic activity, which is represented in terms of GDP, doesn't need to go along the resource consumption basically. We need to decouple, we need to be economically prosperous, but at the same time, how can we ensure the resource consumption is not growing at the same scale and pace as the economy? So that's called resource decoupling. Next is impact decoupling, how the businesses, when they operate, they have an impact on the environment. So how we can reduce that environment impact, but at the same time continue our economic prosperity as well. So that decoupling is impact decoupling. So going forward, we all need to focus on resource decoupling as well as impact decoupling for us to be really sustainable and to achieve net zero by 2050. So, what's the intention of adopting, all these carbon footprinting, circular economy? The intent is to future-proof both your business as well as the planet that we are living in. And some of the risks are compliance risk. As you can see, more and more industry standards are coming up, which are integrating circularity and other carbon footprinting and other requirements. Apart from that, policy and legislation is coming up. One of the examples is ISSB becoming mandatory here in Malaysia. You might have heard of CBAM, which is becoming mandatory. So if you're from certain sectors, you will be impacted by that. Carbon tax might be one. Another risk that corporates might be exposed to. In Singapore, it's already there. But sooner or later, in Malaysia, as well as in other Southeast Asia countries, carbon tax will be implemented. Next is stakeholder pressure. Your customers are asking for more sustainable kind of goods and products that they're buying from. So there is a pressure from your customers. There is a pressure from your investors, because investors understand investing in a company that will be exposed to carbon taxes and other risk, transition as well as physical risk. Investors are willing to invest in companies who are identifying and mitigating those risks. So that's the other pressure that the corporates are facing, which is the stakeholder pressure. And then there are business drivers as well, which is kind of driving the decarbonization or action towards decarbonization in circular economy, which are market access. If you have a product which has lower carbon, it might help you get an entry into a market, like for example, Europe or US, where might be a demand of the product that you're producing. So it might help you get a access into the new market. By adopting circular economy principles, you might be able to, be more competitive as compared to your competition. So if you don't evolve and innovate, the other competitors might go ahead in terms of your, pricing and innovations and the type of services that you're providing to your customers. Next to the risk, as I mentioned, carbon tax, physical risk, transition risk, all are kind of being driven from the business values. And then the carbon footprinting, which is kind of becoming more and more common, we are seeing, especially at the organization level, as well as at the product level as well, product and even service level as well. So all the corporates, if you are into providing products and services, you should start to do your product carbon footprint and the service carbon footprints as well. So if you look at the definition, what exactly definition of circular economy is. So this is the definition from MacArthur Foundation, and they define a circular economy is a restorative and regenerative by design. So basically right at the beginning, you're designing your business, your products and your services, which are restorative and regenerative. And it aims to keep the products, its components and materials at their highest utility and value at all the times of its life cycle. So you need to maximize the components, whatever the product is being used. Its utilization should be highest to the maximum impact and to highest value. By value, it doesn't mean just the economic value, but the value to the society, value to brand value, reputation values. So all those things should contribute to your circular economy. So that's the definition of a circular economy. So before we deep dive, let's look into our linear business model, which is even pretty common these days as well. We call it take, make, use, and lose. We used to call it throw as well. So we used to extract raw materials from the earth. Let's say, for example, to give you a context, let's say a mobile phone is being manufactured. So it will extract cobalt, lithium, and everything. Then it will go into manufacturing steps, which is component manufacture, like let's say battery, LCD screen, all those will be manufactured. Then they will be assembled into a product, let's say a mobile phone. And once a product is developed, then it will be kind of given to service, or it will be sold to the customers. And once it is sold, it will be in use. So let's say a particular end user segment A is using that particular product or service, because we are talking about the linear economy model, which is most common today. And finally, at the end of the life, it just goes into waste, maybe end up in landfill or somewhere. So that's the linear economy that is currently prevalent. Take, make, use, and lose. So what are some of the disadvantages? One is the value creation is dependent on product volume. So company would like to sell more and more phones so that they can make more and more profit. For that, they have to extract more and more, the rare earth metals, and basically all the raw materials need to be extracted again and again, which is linked to that virgin materials and inputs and extraction. And once that is done, there is no consideration of visibility of total cost of ownership, TCO, which is basically everyone looks at their own cost. Like for example, the manufacturer, they will look at what is the capex. They are not really looking into during the use phase, whether I'm making a product which is more energy efficient or not. So currently everyone is looking at their own ownership, not the total or life cycle cost of ownership. And then is the single-use mentality. So a lot of time we just use things one time and throw it. Plastic is a classic example, but it applies to other businesses as well. And then finally, no consideration of the life cycle impact as well. So the businesses need to consider what the life cycle impact of their product, not just during production, but during extraction, consumption, as well as at the end of the life as well. What is the impact of that to the environment? So how does this translate into a circular economy? So I mean, what we learned in the last slide was, there is production, there is use phase, and then there is end of life as well. So circular economy practice need to consider total life cycle perspective of cost. Definitely your cost need to be, not too high. Next is the value to your customer, value proposition to whoever is going to use your products and services. And finally, the impact. What is the impact to the environment, to the society, the job creations and everything. So we need to look at a holistic point of view, not just from the carbon point of view. And how to do that is to embed these circularity principles right at the design phase. Customer proposition, I'll give an example of all these, like how you can have a better customer proposition when you are selling your products and services, how you can have a proper delivery and operation of when a circular economy is in operation in your business, because the product and service quality or performance should not deteriorate even if you're following a circular economy principles in your business. And finally, the business model. So how you're providing, how you're generating revenues, that is another thing that we will be covering, how we can have, as a service business model, instead of your customers owning your product, how there can be, leasing, rental type of model, or as a service type of business models as well. So we'll be deep diving into that. So these are the basics of implementing circular economy and design principles in your organization. So let's transform our linear business model or linear economy into circular economy. So if you remember, this was the circular economy. There is no end of life over here, and there is an end user segment A. Then when we talk about circular economy, how about the service and the product that we are selling? Can that be sold to another user segment as well, instead of just catering it to one end user segment? And we call it, there are two different types of business model. One is called excess, another is called performance. So excess is basically we are making the same product and service accessible to two different or even more customer segments. A classic example is a ride sharing model. So how a car can be used by multiple users so that their utilization is maximized. There is no idle time. Same is with laptop providers like Dell and all. They have this new type of leasing type of model where you don't have to own it, but they will provide you full service agreement for 2 or 3 years. Anything happens, and at the end of the life, they will take it back. Another example is Philips Signify. They are providing lighting as a service model as well. So you don't have to, have a capex, or you don't have to spend upfront on changing the lights. They will charge you on a monthly basis, and if there is any fault in the light, they will come and replace it as well. So that's like a as a service model that that companies are coming up with. Then another is the performance model. Basically, they will guarantee you the performance of the service. Typically, it includes a combination of product and service that they're providing. So lighting as a service is an example of performance. Other can be Rolls-Royce is coming up with this business model of leasing their, the engines and pay as you use type. Other example of performance will be, if you know Caterpillar, they make heavy duty, the earth moving vehicles. So they design all their equipment which can be used multiple times, and it can be recycled as well. So these are some of the new business models which are coming up. Businesses are becoming more innovative, and it makes total business sense as well to implement these business models. So that's something is a key feature of a circular economy if you want to implement it. Next is at the end of the life. Let's say an end user is using it, a product, let's say a laptop or a mobile phone. If it hasn't reached its end of the life, but can it be reconditioned or refurbished to extend its life as well? So instead of just buying a new phone after 2 years and then putting our existing phone in the drawer, can we just get it refurbished and use it for a longer time? So that's called reconditioning type of business model. And as you can see, there is a new box over here. So it doesn't have to go to the product manufacturer. It can be done by some authorized third-party providers as well. However, if it has reached kind of its end of its life, then the product can go directly for remanufacturing to the component manufacturer. Basically, they will take out each and every component, and then they will try to use it in the new product. Same remanufacturing can happen at the product manufacturer's site as well, so that it is just given a new life, and you don't have to extract more and more materials from the environment. So that will help you in that circular economy. Another way is, instead of in the same value chain, you can have a resource recovery. At the end of the life, there are secondary materials market. You might be familiar with like steel market, the scrap steel market, and other, the rare earth metal market. There is a secondary market for that. So resource recovery addresses that, and it can actually go in the same value chain. And when it goes in the same value chain, it is considered closed loop recycling. But in the secondary market, it can go to a totally different value chain as well. So let's say it was a battery that was being recycled at the end of the life from a mobile phone. But the battery is also used in electric vehicles. It can be used at utility scale solar. Can those components be utilized in a different value chain, the same component? So it can be sourced from the secondary materials market. And in case there is no primary and secondary, you can still have sustainable raw materials sourced from circular sourcing. Basically, you can source it from other sources as well, instead of the same value chain or from the secondary markets. Another one is co-product recovery. So when there is component manufacturing, there is a lot of kind of, not really a waste, but there are co-products which are being delivered. So these can be either directly used in the different value chain, or it can be sold in the secondary markets, and from there it can be sold in the different value chains as well. So these are the different, types of things which are operating to convert a linear business model or a linear economy into a circular economy using different kind of business models. So this is kind of the core of how we can start to, but it needs a lot of thinking, contextualizing to your business, which we will be covering later on. All right. So this slide is just a summary of what I've just described in the earlier slide. If you remember, these are the 3 different phases: production, use, and end of life. Under production, if you remember, right from the end we started was circular sourcing, how you can source more circular products which are technically recyclable as well as biologically recyclable. Technical recyclable is basically you break down the complex polymers into monomers, and those monomers can be used in different products. And biological is it goes into the biological cycle. There can be co-product recovery, as I mentioned, like a symbiosis between two value chain. There can be reconditioning, as I mentioned earlier, how you can extend the life of the existing product. But the key thing is there is no new additional warranty given if you are reconditioning your product. But if it is remanufacturing of the product, you will be getting, end customer will be getting like a new or a better product and with a warranty as well. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, the 2 types of business model for end user use is access and performance. So it provides end user with the excess of the functionality of the product or service, and performance is typically a combination of product service bundle. And then finally, it's the resource recovery part as well, how you can recover the resource at the end of the life. So this is summarizing what I mentioned in my earlier slide. All right, so that's the end of section 1 and 2. Now moving on to the next part, which is how circular economy enables net zero transition. So I'm very sure all of you must have seen this, I don't know how many times, scope 1, 2, and 3, and I don't have to tell you again what exactly scope 1, 2, and 3 are. But why is it becoming important for organizations to measure their scope 1, 2, and 3 is because of the Science-Based Target Initiative. A lot of corporates are committing to SBTi, and for that you have to measure your scope 1, 2, and 3. If you are doing your ISSB transition planning, one of the requirements in that is to do your scope 1, 2, and 3 footprinting as well. And finally, the taxonomy alignment. If there are taxonomies coming, like a lot of regions are coming up with their own taxonomy. There is ASEAN taxonomy as well. So if you're doing an activity and if you want to classify it as a circular economy, you need to align it to the taxonomy, and which will need you to footprint your organization as well as product as well. It depends on the context, but to align with the taxonomy, you typically will need to have a good understanding of your scope 1, 2, and 3. Again, this is something you might be already knowing. For most of the sectors, scope 3 is multiple times of your scope 1 and 2 footprint. Let's say, for example, for the retail, scope 3 emissions are almost 28 times of your scope 1 and 2 emissions. Similarly, for the apparel sector, for the services sector, and food and beverage, biotech and manufacturing, it's the same thing. The scope 3 is multiple times of your scope 1 and 2. And the challenge with scope 3 is it's not under your direct control. It's coming from your upstream business operation, from your suppliers, and downstream, which is your customers or how your products are being used as well. So that's why it makes it a bit challenging. And circular economy specifically will help you in reducing your scope 3, which is a bit hard to decarbonize. So if you remember from the last year, I explained about this, decarbonization roadmap. So on the left-hand side is your baseline year emissions, and on the right-hand side is your target emissions, which is net zero, let's say by 2050. So typically, we will work with the clients to come up with, what are the different initiatives that they have to implement in order to start decarbonizing. So we call it a waterfall chart. So there are these initiatives which in a circular economy, they will apply to each of those steps. But even if they do their best, there is something called diminishing returns. No matter how hard you try, it's much harder to decarbonize one particular, kind of aspect of your business or one particular production line or something, because there is always a low-hanging fruit. It's easier to decarbonize first, but later as you grow, it becomes more and more difficult. And that's where the innovation gap comes into the picture, that how this circular economy can help and can bridge this innovation gap, where the entire economy will be working in a circularity, and your own scope 3, category 1, and everything will start to decarbonize as well, because scope 3 is not directly under your control. So this is so crucial. I mean, we have been developing these decarbonization roadmap for a lot of clients, and there is always some gap under certain scenarios. And we believe one of the ways this gap can be filled is through transitioning from linear economy to a more circular economy. All right, so now we'll be deep diving into circularity in practice, specifically in the mobile devices and the ICT sector first. So let's look into that, how you're applying circular business models in mobile device and ICT services as well. So we will be covering both mobile device and the ICT service. So this is a typical carbon footprint, scope 1, 2, and 3 for a, let's say for a mobile company. And as expected, most of their emissions are coming from their scope 3. Around 75% emissions are from scope 3, 23% is coming from scope 2, and only 1% is from the scope 1 activities. And where exactly scope 3 emissions are coming from, if we deep dive further, it's the 3 categories: purchase goods and services, the raw materials that the mobile company is buying, then is the use of sold product, how the mobile phones are used downstream, that is contributing significantly to the scope 3 emissions. And finally, the capital goods, which is basically the assembly lines that the mobile manufacturer will purchase to assemble the mobiles. So those capital goods, these 3 are already contributing, I think, around 74% of the scope 3 emission. So these are the hotspots for the mobile manufacturer, and they need to start to focus on these to reduce these emissions so that their scope 3 emissions can come down as well. And these are some other categories which are not most material, but those are important as well. As they start to decarbonize these, all these will become more and more important going forward, maybe in 10 years, 15 years time. And I mean, this is from a report that we published for achieving climate targets in the telco sector. So there we modeled different initiatives and what will be the impact of those initiatives on the decarbonization. So as you can see, designing for longevity and repair will have a big impact on scope 3 decarbonization, specifically on decarbonization of equipment and the services that the mobile service provider is providing. So there can be almost 20% reduction in the carbon emissions. Similarly, business model innovation to implement circular economy in devices, including energy efficiency of devices, as well as the lifetime extension of device, will contribute significantly to reducing the scope 3 emissions as well. And there are other levers as well that the mobile and ICT sectors need to pull or implement in order to really achieve net zero targets, specifically for their scope 3 as well. So there's a wider stakeholder, government engagement and all which are required. But today's topic is more on circular economy, and that will be specific to this box. So multiple parties, as I mentioned, mobile network operators, manufacturers, retailers, and governments all need to come together so that the corporates who have committed to net zero can achieve those net zero targets. So now let's look into specific for a mobile device. How are the emissions across the life cycle? So life cycle means starting from materials, procurement, then production of the mobile device, transportation of the finished mobile device, use of the mobile device, and finally, end of life. And as you can see, most of the emissions are actually coming from raw materials in the production. Majority of emissions are coming from the upstream, we call it like upstream activities in the life cycle. But the other phases, I mean, they are not so significantly contributing to the emissions. And that's where circular economy, if you start to, whatever materials that you have used in your first life, if you can use the same in the second life as well, this part can be decarbonized significantly. So we'll look into that, how we did the calculations for first life and second life. So here we are comparing net life cycle emissions for a new device. What are the carbon emissions? This is similar to the last slide which I showed. Majority of the emissions are coming from materials and production, transportation, and then there is first use period and end of life as well. So how typically a mobile seller will calculate its carbon footprint is, they will have an average carbon emission per mobile. They will multiply it with the number of mobiles that they're selling, and then they will have their emissions for that particular kind of line of mobile that they're selling. But when we compare it to the same mobile phone refurbished, and it is used in the second phase as well, we can see the total emissions are larger, but the material and production emissions can be netted off because the same material that we are using. Only additional emissions will be coming from that refurbished phone transportation, refurbishment process, and the second use phase. So that's how, when you're looking at a whole life cycle of one mobile phone, first use, second use, maybe even third use, we will start to see lesser and lesser impact of the carbon footprint of the mobile phone. So now if we look at how the operator, let's say a network operator who do sell mobile phones as well, how each of these new devices purchased by operators, it goes into operators scope 3 categories. So when they're purchasing a new mobile device, there is a lot of materials and the production process which will contribute to upstream scope 3 emissions. There will be some scope 1 and 2 emissions, and finally the downstream emissions which is coming from the use of the mobile devices as well. So this chart is from the view of an operator, mobile network operator. So this is for a new device, but if the operator is selling a refurbished device or remanufactured device, how it will help them reduce their scope 3. And as you can see, in the second life, all what has been already accounted, the material and the production in the first life will not be accounted again for the mobile operator, and they will be able to reduce significantly their upstream scope 3 emissions. But there will still be the transportation, refurbishment process, and the second use phase emissions, which will still contribute to the scope 3 emissions as well. So this is an example how a mobile, once it starts to change its business model, and how a mobile operator, basically the network operator, they start to sell refurbished device, how it will help them reduce their scope 3 emissions as well. So this is a bit more quantitative. We quantified it for one of our clients. So if this is the new kind of phone, but when a mobile operator is selling a lightly refurbished phone, they will still be accounting for some of the emissions from transportation and extraction. That's because the mobile phone didn't reach its end of life. That will mean they still have to account for some of the remaining life into the second life or the refurbished life as well. So that's how the accounting principle works. But if it was end of life and refurbished, or it was repaired with new components or repaired with used components, the reduction can be quite significant. I hope this slide is clear, although I'll take the questions at the end, but if anyone has any questions now, I can take it now, because these are a bit complicated. Yeah. Yeah, it's not 100%. As of today, no. It is still picking up slowly. I mean, the adoption rate of refurbishment, I mean, Apple has been doing it for a while, but it's not at the scale which will really move the needle, not yet. But there are some, you might have heard of Fairphone. Fairphone is a company which is specifically focusing on this. They have implemented this type of leasing agreement, how they're using refurbished phone. So Fairphone is one of the examples of the business in the mobile phone manufacturer who is actually implement. And I mean, the company that we did it for was Assurant actually, these calculations. And they wanted to know if a mobile operator is selling a second-hand phone, what is the impact to the carbon and all. So things are slowly picking up, I'll say, especially in our region, not yet. I mean, one of the drivers for these to pick up is, regulations as well. So once we have start some, regulations from the government on capping extraction of raw materials, so there is like cross-border, I mean, I don't want to discuss the topic of tariffs and all, but hopefully those things will help us, in the circular economy. Yeah. Any other questions from anyone? All right, I think we still have some time, so we'll continue on this. So we are going even a bit more further detail on how to operationalize the circularity in mobile operations. So to give you a context, there are three main categories: inflows, which is basically the materials and components that you're buying. Next is the use phase, how your mobile is being used, and finally is the outflows as well, which is at the end of the life, what is leaving the company or your user as well. So these are the three main categories. So using these three main categories, how we can develop a roadmap to achieve the ambitious change that we want. So as you can see, this is a matrix. Horizontally, we have the three categories that I mentioned earlier, which was inflows, use phase, and the outflows as well. But nothing needs to be done, right from the first year. It has to be a stepped approach. So the first step is establishing the foundation. So you need to get your basics correct in the first few years. And how you do that is, for inflows, you start to assess your suppliers. You might have many suppliers, but you start to assess your suppliers based on certain questionnaires that you give to them, and it includes questions related to circularity principle. So just to assess where your suppliers are in terms of circularity. And then next is engaging with your top suppliers. So once you've identified which are the most impactful suppliers, then you start to engage them and you check with them what exactly they are doing in terms of the materials that they're using, the resources that they're using. Do they have any plans, or do they have any roadmap of using basically the the circular or the sourcing from the circular markets and all. And you can even start to get some quotes from them in the first year. Okay, if I have to buy a refurbished item or something which is using more circular kind of materials, what's the price for that? You can start that in the very first year. Then you start with the use phase, how you can develop program for device take back. So this is something currently I think the most common contract is 2 years contract, and after 2 years contract the phone belongs to you and people will buy a new phone as well. But can there be a new business model where phone can be taken back and you can be given a new phone as well, and that old phone can be probably recycled back as well. And then we'll be developing refurbished device offering as well. So you start to offer those type of devices which are refurbished. And I mean, you need to invest in the infrastructure as well before you start to offer those products and services. So you need to have service centers, how you will manufacture, how you will source it. So start to invest on those offerings. And then you establish the process for that network equipment. And finally is the waste, the outflows that goes out. So you need to start the measurement of what actually is going out of what type of waste, where is the waste landing? Is it landing in the landfill? Is it actually being recycled in the market as well? And then definitely for the hazardous waste, there are a lot of certifications available. So you can start to get those certifications in the first year. And next is scale up. Once you have done your foundations correct, you need to start slowly scaling it up. So you start to collaborate with those suppliers, and you start to, have more advanced discussions with them on the materials that they're using and all. And then you start to include circularity in your supplier selections criteria as well. You need to start to have supplier engagement sessions and discussions programs with them as well. And for the use phase, you scale up the handset repair and refurbishment. So unless that service is available, things will not happen. So you need to start to serve refurbishment and repair services as a mobile operator. And then how you can have a longer modular and repairability of those equipments as well. So if the screen is broken, that doesn't mean you have to buy a new phone, how it can be repaired, how it can be more accessible and more affordable, so that new mobile phones are not purchased. And if you have your foundations correct, you need to start to roll out the waste management practices as well. And then finally, how you can embed the circularity within your businesses. You actively engage your suppliers. You have those ratings embedded in your contracts with your suppliers. You ask them to specifically align to these international ratings as well, so that they are going to actually implement circularity within their own businesses. And then again, how you can just scale those programs, the refurbishment, take back devices programs as well. And then establishing waste recycling measurement and certification programs for your waste as well. So this is a framework. I mean, for every company, it will look different, but the concept is, it's a matrix. You have your inflows, you have your use phase, you have your outflows, and how you can divide this journey into 3 phases, starting with foundation, then you scale up, and then you finally embed it into your business. So that's the framework that you can use. All right, so next one is on the footwear and apparel sector. So how we can implement circularity in the footwear and apparel sector. And as you can see over here, I mean, this is the linear business model in apparel sector, typically very common in the fast fashion industry. They want to buy us every few months, and there is no circularity, and typically those clothes will end up in the landfill. So that is typically, there is extraction, or like in this case, it's the leather, there is chemical treatment, it is transported to the manufacturing facility, clothes are manufactured, they're transported to the customers, and once customer has used it, then it ends up in the landfill or maybe in the incinerator as well. So this is something we need to change, and how we can implement circularity in the clothes and apparel sector is by recycling or having kind of repair and restore type of business models in the clothing and the footwear. And that's how we will save from a lot of clothes and footwear ending up in the landfill, and we don't have to extract more raw materials from the nature as well. So that's the basic principle. So if we apply to one of the clients that we were working for in the apparel industry, when we had a lot of sessions with them, we identified 2 main kind of areas where they can implement. One is called pre-consumer. There is a lot of defect clothes that they will have even before it reaches to the consumer. So how that defective cloth can be brought in, repaired, and resold again. That was one area that was identified. Next was, after it is sold to the customers, how we can take back those used clothes from the customer, again repair and resold it into the market. So these were the 2 main kind of levers or areas that were identified to decarbonize or implement circular economy principles for that. One was called waste as a resource, another was extending the lifetime, which is for after the consumer has used the goods as well. And this is the another, again, framework which I have explained earlier, how you can use it to your own business and identify which of the areas actually works for you and which will have the most impact to your business as well. So for that particular client in the apparel sector, we started to model as well. So let's say if there is a kind of resale, product repair and resale, it actually significantly helps it will help the client to reduce their emissions almost by up to 40%. And as you can see in this graph, this is the BAU scenario, how the, under the linear economy, how the emissions will be. But with that circularity in place, there was almost 40% less than the emission as compared to the new product. So this is just one example, but they need to implement a lot of other initiatives as well in order to be in line with the science trajectory, which is 1.5 degrees centigrade decarbonization pathway. And yeah, definitely there were other emission reduction initiatives as well, not just this one, like, procuring green energy, electric vehicles, and others as well, which were explored with this client. All right, finally, it's about approaching circularity. So how do you approach a circularity? The first step is to understand the climate risk and opportunities. And that's where, most of you will be doing your ISSB. And when you do your ISSB report, depending on the sector you are in, this will be highlighted to you, like where exactly the risks are coming from in your supply chain, and how circularity will actually help you, not just risk mitigation, but in opportunity as well. So if you have a new business model like repair and recycle, refurbished devices and all, it might present a new business opportunity for you if your competitor is not doing it. The difficult part will be how to make it economically competitive as well. Theoretically, yes, if you have a refurbished device, ideally it should be cheaper, you're not extracting anything. But because the infrastructures are not there yet, the scale is not there, it can be a bit more expensive. So that's the hardest part, how to make sure it will make economic sense as well. And at the same time, what you're providing, the durability, the quality, the service still remain the same as for the new device as well. If you are in those steel and other sectors as well, CBAM is the one that will be impacting you. So in steel, we are already talking about scrap steel, how scrap steel can be used, that will have much lower emissions on the output as compared to extracting virgin steel. And once you have a good understanding, next will be vision and ambition, whether your organization have set a net zero target, or are there any commercial opportunities? Like for example, there might be some markets where refurbished goods are in good demand. Patagonia is one of the examples you might have seen there in the Fashion Repro. They have a very, very different thinking, the way they have manufacturing their products. They're actually asking clients not to buy their products a lot, but how to extend the lifetime of their products and everything. So the way businesses are operating is changing as well. They are some of them which are really thinking about environment as well. But business, in terms of profitability and environmental impact, as I mentioned earlier, needs to go hand in hand. So once you have those visions, commercial opportunities, you start to model the impacts as well. So how this implementing circular economy principles, circularity, will help you achieve your science-based target. And then you start to identify, you start to analyze and model business model development. As I mentioned, currently you might be on a linear business model, but can you have new innovative business models, like as a service business model, sharing, leasing type of business models as well. And in order to implement that circularity, you have to engage your stakeholders, your customers, your suppliers, and even the infrastructure providers as well. So all those need to be engaged. And these are all, there is a learning and iteration all throughout the process. It's not going to happen in 1 year. You have to keep improving, keep learning all throughout the process. And once you identify, you need to validate. You have to do in-depth opportunity analysis. You need to make a business case of that. And once you have done all these, then you need to start to pilot it. And then you need to scale it up as well if it is working well. So how you can have a new product design, development and deployment of that product, the new business model, piloting, and the deployment of those business models as well. So all these are iterative. You have learnings on the way, and you keep improving until you have a business case and a product and a service which is working perfectly well. So one of the key stakeholders will be your consumers as well. So consumers need to be kind of engaged and told how buying a refurbished device is better for environment. So the consumer mindset need to be changed as well, rather than buying a new cloth or a new mobile devices, how they can prefer to buy a refurbished device and clothes as well. All right, next is, we call it like a circular innovation challenge, but this is just an example process how within your organizations you can start to discuss with the different stakeholders within your organization. So it starts with establishing a foundation of common language and understanding. So implementing circularity in your business is not just one department's job. If only one department is doing it, it won't be successful. You need to engage all, including your top of the top. You need to get a buy-in from them, and all the different departments need to have a buy-in. Maybe your strategy department, your innovation department, your R&D department, all of them need to be on board if you want to really have a circular business model implemented in your organization. So it starts with defining a common vision and the challenge. So what, as an organization, what is the common vision that you all have, and what are the challenges in implementing that vision as well? So that's the first step. And once you have done that, you need to examine the external trends. What are your competitors doing around the globe? What is going on in your sector as well? And what are the external risks and opportunities? If you don't implement those circular economy principles within your business, what are the risks? And if you implement, what are the opportunities for your business as well? So that's the second step that you need to implement. Third is examine your current business model or the value chain and its strengths and weaknesses as well. So you need to map out your entire value chain. You need to assess each of those, material or hotspot areas. What are the strengths and the weaknesses of all of those? And once you do that, fourth will be decide on design criteria. I think I mentioned it in my earlier part. Right at the design stage, you need to think about this circular economic principle. So you need to decide on design criteria for the future business model, what you need to achieve from this, implementing circular economy. So there can be a long list of the design criteria that you have. But once you have done this fourth step, next is how to effectively innovate and explore the new ideas. So the next fourth step will be draw the inspiration from the innovation principle and the case studies which I've shared in this slide. And after that, innovate new business model or the value chain. As I mentioned, I've given you some of the examples, but you have to see whether those business models are applicable, which business model is applicable for your organization. And then you need to assess new business model options versus the design criteria. So design criteria was done over here, which was a long list. And what you're implementing, you have to assess your business model options versus the design criteria that you have. And then finally, you have to develop a roadmap and plan for the next steps as well. So this is a very comprehensive. Typically, this is done over multiple workshops with multiple clients. It can be done in one day as well, or maybe 2 days. You can bring in several departments, and just in different phases, you can just complete this exercise in 2 days as well. But typically, suggestion will be to keep it for a long run, maybe over a few months, because people will start to think, people will come up with their own ideas as well, and then you can keep refining all these processes as well until you have a proper roadmap and plan for implementing the next steps as well. All right, I think we still have around 5 more minutes, so we will go through some of the case studies as well. So I've already covered this earlier. So this client was Assurant. Anyone has heard of Assurant? It's a US company. They are a business services company, and they do provide assurances and all. So they came to us with this kind of problem statement. If their customers are buying a second-hand mobile phone, what will be the carbon impact as compared to the new mobile phone? So as you can see, we worked with them. We came up with some calculations and all, and we were able to come up with so first was the methodology, how to calculate. Another one was the data that they were using to calculate that, how the data quality can be improved. So we worked with them on both of that. All right, next one is Dr. Martens. They are also in footwear manufacturing, and they had this R&R model, which is called repair and recycle model. So we were working with them on that. We identified this as one of the levers, and when they brainstormed internally, they identified, okay, this makes total business sense as well, and they said we will be going ahead and implementing this. So they are already implementing this R&R model, repair and recycle model, and the goal is it will help them significantly reduce the percentage of sales from repair and resale over coming decade. So they are taking a long-term view, and their belief is repair and recycle will become more and more common and normal as compared to buying new shoes. And this is also linked to the climate risk and opportunity disclosure, which is the ISSB S2 as well. So when you are doing similar circular economy kind of innovations, you can always disclose it in your ISSB S2 as well, like what are your plans and how it will help you to reduce and mitigate. First is identify, and then mitigate and manage your climate-associated risks. This is another major chemical company that implemented. For them it was about KPI, the metrics actually. They wanted to understand what should be the metrics they should be using to monitor whether the circularity that they're adopting is on progress or not. So the 3 metrics that we recommended them was circular sourcing, how they are sourcing the raw materials. Next was circular innovation, how they are going to invest specifically certain budget towards R&D, so that they can have more circular products. And finally, it was on the circular sales as well, how much revenue they are generating from circular sales year on year. And the projection was the revenue from circular sales will increase over time, or that's what their goal was. So this was for one of the major chemical companies. All right, so that's the end of my session, but I think we still have few minutes, so we will be happy to take some questions, and after that there will be a panel discussion.
Hi, thanks, Prannoy, David Tay. I was just going to ask about this circularity. You talk about mobile phones, right? And I know the panel also is from telco.
Yep.
There's about like 100 million handset in Southeast Asia. And we talk about refurbish. Definitely, you won't be as resources intensive as you talk about whole repurpose, convert waste to in the, what do you call it again? There was this carpet company, right? They sort of take the carpets, then they convert it with the whole supply chain they control. So I just stick to example with the mobile phone first. What are the infrastructure that you actually need to collect all these handset or refurbish? And then maybe I will ask the next question about other business other than non-mobile, which maybe is much more complex supply chain. Because I'm solely targeting at R0 or R1 about redesign. Refurbish sort of in R5, right? Sort of in the middle, not recycle, right? So maybe I'll let you to share details of this mobile phone. Or maybe telco, do you sort of look to something more modular? I'm not sure whether people think about this is that most of the time our handset can still still usable, but we are forced, or your handset no longer be supported. So I think the question is around not so much about telco, it's actually more about the handset. They have to continue to make money, right? At the same time, they also want to do this circularity. It's actually quite changing paradigm. I'll let you share with us. Thanks.
Yeah, that's correct. So if I address your first question first, if you can quickly repeat me, if I got your first question first, it was about the first question.
Was that just the circularity in terms of the infrastructure for you guys to? Yeah,
all right. So what exactly is required to, and you want some examples not from ICT, right? So I'll give you an example of that in, let's say, plastic. So So, I mean, we talk a lot about plastic recircularity. I mean, theoretically, technically, you might have seen a lot of, on the bottles, you will say designed for recycle. But that's only the design. Whether it is recyclable or not, it depends on a lot of factors. First is sorting it out, whether we as the end users are able to sort it out or we are actually mixing it with other things as well. Next is, even if it is sorted out, whether it is recyclable or not, the infrastructure. Basically, when a plastic bottle, steel bottle, everything is mixed together, whether the sorting line can sort it out or not. And one solution to do that is something called like a watermark actually. And in Europe, they're already kind of piloting it. It's called, I forgot the name, but what it does is every product, every bottle will have an invisible watermark. And when it goes into the sorting machine, AI and the robots will be able to sort it out. And based on that, it will kind of, sort one type of plastic bottles into one type. And then other technology will be your chemical recycling. So how the bottles, complex polymers can be, brought it to its original monomer forms, and those monomers can then be sold in the market. But another thing is, like the deposit return scheme. So you're talking about the infrastructure, right? So even if the infrastructure is there, like there is a deposit facility, but what if we as a consumer are not doing it? We're not taking initiative to go and deposit it. That's where the deposit return scheme comes into the picture. And what it does it will charge the consumers a bit of, kind of an advance, maybe 30, 50 or 40 cents. But when you're depositing it at that recycling center, you will get that money back. So through that, so as you can see, there are different parties involved, and each of them have a role to play, whether it's technology, whether it's us, or the infrastructure and the technology providers as well. So that is one of the examples in the non-ICT and the infrastructure part as well. And your second question was about non-ICT as well, right? But yeah, yeah. Yep. Correct. Fair phone. Yeah. Oh, in the Southeast Asia. I mean, that's a business opportunity, I will say. So if something is not available, I mean, we should make it available. To me, I see. But at the end of the day, any success will depend on, the consumers, end users. Whether end users would prefer to buy an iPhone, 16, or they'll prefer to buy a modular phone, which is like a fair price, or they will continue to use, the fair phone. So at the end of the day, that's where that marketing and that capacity building for the consumers is very important as well. And I'm sure a lot of even I didn't know about fair phone. So we need to help those new companies, how they are messaging it to the consumers, how their products are going to help the environment. And probably Gen Z are the ones who care more about the environment than us, so they can be targeted, kind of market for those type of products and services as well. But I've seen Gen Z also are into fast fashion and all. So that is another sector where, recycling and all can be used. I've seen Levi's, they are coming up with some program where your used jeans can be put back into the recycling center. And there are actually lot of sectors have started to implement those type of, initiatives, recycle, buyback and all those. Yep. All right, I think we have. Okay, I'll come to you here.
Okay, I do have two parts question. Number one, regarding the part that we showed all the statistics about scope 1, 2, and 3. So 1, 2 is pretty simple, but then come to scope 3, so use of soap products, I'm not sure how you come up with actual numbers over there, because you see there's a lot of uncertainties in this kind of use. Mobile phones is trackable, I can go through software, but when it comes to a secondary use, how do you know that we say secondary use or the first use? How to segregate those two parts? That's one. Secondly, all these are consumer products, right? So when it comes to consumer products, behavioral is one thing of the consumers, whether they are thinking about it. Take away that part even, if they are educated enough to maybe go through even doing the recycling part. from the statistics telling us that the recycling of a mobile phone, the carbon emissions is as high as building a new one, almost at the same carbon emissions. So why go there in the first place?
Can you repeat your second question? Maybe I'll answer your first question first. How to distinguish between the first phase and the second phase, right?
Yeah.
So typically, as you know, like a mobile company will sell their phone if it is in their own value chain. And when a mobile phone is brought back to them, I mean, they will have an accounting actually. And then they will sell it back in the market. So from accounting point of view, we will know, okay, this is the phase one life or second phase. And that's so important to consider is because sometimes someone can come, you know, just after 2 months. They can come in and then say, I want a new phone or I want to refurbish it. That doesn't mean you can account your entire, you know, material production to your first phase life. It has to be attributed to the second phase as well. Let's say a mobile phone has a life of 6 years. So, I mean, that 6 years has to be apportioned to the different users. Maybe first user is 3 years, second user is 3 years. But if someone is, you know, not using it for that entire 6 year, then they need to be apportioned accordingly for the first use or second use as well. So in terms of how to track it, I think it's possible. As long as it's not going into, you know, some outside of the, you know, the proper value chain, it is going into like secondary market or somewhere, as long as it's tracked. And that's where the new technologies like, you know, blockchain and all, those come into handy, where exactly to trace whether it's first phase, second phase, where end of the life, even, and I think some of them are already using those to track whether the product is ending up in the landfill or in the incineration plant and all as well. So that was your first question. Your second question here.
Second question is about the end of life, that why go and do mean the whole value chain of actually taking it back and recycling when the carbon footprint is almost as high as creating a new one?
Oh no, it's much lower. It's actually much lower. Yeah. Let me. So you're talking about this slide, is that correct?
No, the end of life when you do recycling.
Yeah. So end of life, when you do recycling, actually it will impact your first part. So when you are doing end of life recycling, that will mean, so this one, right? When you are doing end of life recycling, that means you don't have to extract anything from the earth. That means things are circular in the economy. That means it becomes a closed loop. The same material that you have extracted for the new phone, those will be used for the next new phone as well. That means your impact or extraction from the, you know, raw virgin materials, you don't have to do that. And that's how it will impact your carbon emissions by quite a lot.
And that's arguable because there's subsidies already been done.
Yeah.
Okay. Never mind that. Actually, there I'm thinking about if it's going through the circular economy. Like I say, it's consumer product.
Yep.
Right, even now they talk about fashions, fast fashion, all these things coming in. Whether to go back to the original manufacturers to do circular economy, I was thinking that if there's any way to actually be really trackable, if it's go to the secondary market where it's not original. Phones happens all the time. So you go to a secondary, go through the whole cycle. It's still circular economy, but it's not going back to the original manufacturers.
Yeah, that's fine. So I mean, that's what we call like different, like the value chain. It can be a totally different value chain. It can be from, you know, a mobile manufacturer to, let's say, an electric vehicle, because the component that they use, cobalt, lithium, nickel, which are used in mobile, it's only the scale. In EV, you will need a bigger battery, but those small components can be used in the different value chain as well. So it doesn't have to be the same value chain. As long as it is in the environment, we all are using, and that's why we call it like symbiosis. The different businesses have to be dependent on each other's. One's waste can become another one's resources. So those are the principles here. It doesn't have to be the same, but I think I shared, but there is certain advantages if you are using within, because the transportation and everything becomes, there are some certain advantages.
You have to really calculate this after that.
Correct. I think we have time for just one more question because we have a panel discussion coming up. And okay, we'll take 2 questions here quickly. Yeah.
Okay. My question is, for companies that says we are giving or disposing our scheduled, non-scheduled waste to registered certified vendors for disposal and recycling. Is that sufficient? That's one. The second one is for the 3 case studies you gave, who are the target audience and how's the business like so far?
I mean, your first question is about the scheduled waste, right? So for that, you have to work with your contractor and even look at the contract, like what exactly your, the waste off-taker is doing with that. Do they have like zero waste to landfill kind of certification or not? Whether they are going to collect the waste and put it in the landfill. So they also have to get a third-party certification. Then only they will be like credible, like what the practices they're doing, because the third-party verifier will verify all the processes, records, and everything in the past, and that's how you as an end customer can have like peace of mind. Okay, that your waste is actually not ending up in the landfill. And the next was out of the 3 case studies, which one is how the consumers.
Who are the target audience?
Correct. So I mean, all of these are more of like kind of product like the consumer-driven products. So the first example was on the Assurant, right? So that's on the mobile phone. So I mean, the thinking is a bit different from in certain countries. They're already thinking about these mobile phones. They think, I have a mobile phone, my wife has a mobile phone, my kids have a mobile phone. After 2-3 years, we all get new phones and we have a drawer full of mobile phones. So instead of that, how can we just keep using it? So is there anyone in the market who is providing that? So it really depends how the consumer is thinking. There might be a small portion of those, but once they start to think from that, companies like Assurant and they provide assurance as well, Assurant company. So if someone wants an assurance on the refurbished phone, I think that's where another business model comes into the picture, like an assurance provider is there. And then the other example was for Dr. Martens, that's the shoes actually. So typically in the old days, we used to say shoe can last for 10 years, right? And shoe actually, if you repair it properly, it can last for longer. And that's what Dr. Martens believe in. But going forward, people will be buying less, new shoes, but how the old shoes can be, rebranded, it can be repaired and recycled as well. So it seems there is a market, and they had a discussion internally with their strategy team and all, and they are actually going ahead and implementing it. They've tested the market.
So in conclusion, you do see this as a growing space.
Yeah, correct. In future, but at the end of the day, it has to be driven by consumers. So we have to demand. We have to create that demand. Oh, I want a recycled shoe. Is there any service provider in the market or not? So ultimately, it's all about consumer, about us actually, how we are changing ourselves. Yeah. Mm. Correct. Correct. Exactly. A very good point. I mean, there are practical challenges on implementing, circularity principles. As you mentioned, the recycling rate is so low, the infrastructure is not there, even at the end user are not. But that doesn't stop us from, developing these circular economy principles, because once the businesses start to kind of commit to these type of principles, you will be able to influence, the government and the infrastructure providers as well. And maybe the private parties will come in and put money, because if there is demand for such infrastructures, so they will be able to kind of, okay, there are like, let's say 10 or 15 corporates in a particular industrial site, and you have a demand for that infrastructure, someone can come in and set up that facility specific for you. Or you can bring in, like-minded corporates or companies together to make that thing happen. But yeah, I mean, waiting for, government to come in and implement, it might be a bit challenging. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, also exporting those waste, I think there are some restrictions. I mean, all the waste cannot be restricted. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Correct. So I mean, that's a perfect research. I mean, that we will need actually the data. What are the challenges? And once we know what are the exact challenges, then we have to work with the multiple stakeholders to overcome those challenges as well. What is required It can be, multiple Southeast Asia as a region coming together, the G2G kind of discussions about specifically on this to make it happen. So yeah, only one party doing it will not be possible. You have to bring all of them together to make it a success, yeah. And there will be challenges, everything there are challenges, but it's all about solving those challenges, yeah. Some of them are easy to solve, some of them can take a longer time to solve. But it's all about intent, what we want to do, and we're giving that intent to the stakeholders so that everything can move in that direction. All right,
Yeah.
I think we are a bit late of time, so, but thank you very much. Yeah, we'll be going forward with our panel discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for Prannoy for the presentation. So now we change to the panel discussion. So yeah, so I'm going to go to the front. So yeah, let's welcome Philip from the CelcomDigi and also Shohinee from the Axiata group. Yeah, so I think before the discussion start, I probably just give a very brief introduction about two panelists we are inviting here today. So yeah, we can start with Shohinee. So Shohinee is the head of sustainability at Axiata Group. Within 22 years, telecom spanning Malaysia, India, and the UAE experience. So at Axiata, she oversees sustainability performance across South Asia and also lead on Axiata's internal Scope 1, 2, 3 GHG emission calculation, science-based target setting, and also the decarbonization strategy and road mapping. And then we also have another panelist, is Philip. He is the head of the sustainability at CelcomDigi. So a 24-year veteran of the company, Philip has shaped his sustainability journey from regulatory strategy to human rights advocacy. And he is also a pioneer in ESG integration, digital inclusion, and climate resilience. And he is also the former president of the Malaysia Business Council for Sustainability.
All right, thank you very much, Ying, for the introduction to our esteemed panelists, and a very thank you to Philip and Shohinee for joining our session today. The title for our panel discussion is Decarbonizing the Tech and the Telecommunications Sector. What are the challenges, opportunities, and the road ahead as well? So we will have this session for around 35 minutes or so, and you will have time at the end to ask some questions to the panelists as well. So without further ado, if you have to kick off on, some opening reflections on the why. So I mean, ICT and telecom sector are the major enabler of decarbonization for other sectors. But if you look at the sector itself, there's a lot of emissions associated with ICT and the telecom sector. So from your perspective, why is it urgent for ICT sector and the telecom sector to decarbonize? So what's the urgency to decarbonize? So Philip, if you would like to start first, or Srini, anyone here?
Okay. So maybe again, CelcomDigi, we are the largest telco in Malaysia at this point. If I approach the question from three points of view, as a business, it's actually about business continuity, right? So energy cost is going up. We are moving from the age of AI to AI, the age of information, where we're searching web, now into a age of artificial intelligence. If you don't know, every time you do a ChatGPT query compared to a Google search, you're using 10 times more in terms of energy, right? So we predict that energy consumption and data demand is growing exponentially in the next decade. So for us, it so makes business sense. How do you continue making business if you don't decouple, like we said earlier, your energy use and your data demand, right? So from a business perspective, it makes absolute sense to go down decarbonization. From an industry perspective, it's also the same, right? To remain competitive in the long run, as we offer, as we are moving, for CelcomDigi, we are moving from a telco to a telco tech. That means we are predicting that our business in the future is more technology services rather than just basic connectivity, right? And that's also the same thing. How do you remain competitive in that arena? And last but not least, I think it's stakeholders. Stakeholders, shareholders, they're all demanding action right? And then how do you become a responsible provider in that space? So these are the driving factors for us.
First of all, thank you so much, Prannoy, for having us here. I fully agree with Philip. But just to take a step back, telecoms or ICT is approximately 1.5 or 2% of the global emissions, or responsible for the global emissions. That does place us at a moderate position. We are not right at the top of the ladder. But having said that, with the rampant increase of networks and the consumption of data traffic, the proliferation of cloud-based services, the increased need for data center capacity, that absolute number is growing at a much higher trajectory than it used to in the past. And therefore comes the urgency associated with it. But like Philip said, economic factors is one of the biggest reasons. Energy cost for the telco sector is perhaps one of the biggest chunk of our OPEX. Also regulators across the world. In Europe, we've seen that. Increasingly, it's happening in Asia. In our own country here in Malaysia, it's become so pronounced, right, with the latest release of NSRF in September last year. So there's a lot more ask for disclosures when it comes to, carbon roadmap, what is the journey, and therefore investor confidence is also linked to that, right? So all of those factors together, in addition to economic reasons, is what's making it very urgent. And of course, as responsible citizens and responsible players in the corporate sector, there is always the urgency that's going to remain.
Thank you. And I mean, linking it to the circularity that we just discovered, and I mean, that we discussed, I mean, to make circularity work in the economy, we will need ICT solutions. Like example, I mean, we talked about the blockchain and all, how to trace each of the products which is going in, where exactly it is ending up, whether it is ending up in the same value chain or in the different value chain. And that's where I think the role of ICT in enabling decarbonization in other sector is very, very crucial. And I mean, just a follow-up question on that, Philip, I mean, if I can ask you, what is at stake for the businesses that don't move fast enough actually? Because everyone is moving. I mean, there was a question earlier, like, so there will be some businesses which might not be moving that fast, but I mean, companies like you are really pioneering this. So what's at stake for the businesses that won't move fast enough?
Yeah. So maybe a quick answer and a longer answer. The quick answer is that my first job was Kodak. Okay, for those people who have no idea what I'm talking about, you're not in my age band, right? So we were selling Kodak films, and we were in every corner of Malaysia. Every grocery shop had it. And just overnight, when technology changed, it died, right? So if you are younger, maybe you know about Nokia, right? Everyone used to have a Nokia phone. So we've seen it happen before, and we won't be surprised if a telco doesn't change. It will go down exactly that same road. We've already foreseen it, and we know it, right? So going back to a longer question, moving forward, I was saying we are moving from telco to tech, right? Telco tech company. So example, today, if you happen to come to CelcomDigi, we have a AI experience center that you can visit. Also within it, there's a few use scenario cases, right? So we are having XR, experiential reality. Those are new services that we're looking at. That allows for digital twin. As you know, digital twin can help decarbonize with a lot of solutions, right? We are looking at AI, drones, sensing technology. So even with DHL, there's a DHL warehouse in PJ. At 6 o'clock when everyone goes home, all the drones and robotics come alive. So the drones will scan the whole warehouse, all the barcodes, where the stock are, and then the little robots will start moving the stock back to the original location. So next morning when people come in, everything is back in space, right? So these are the tech solutions that is related to telco services, right? And these are the areas where we see ourselves moving into. So because it's very easy to stay complacent, and then you'll be obsolete.
So if I have to summarize, you're looking at both as a necessity to remain competitive and as well as opportunity as well. If you're the first mover, first mover will always have an advantage on that. Great. So if I move to a next segment, I mean, we're talking US tariffs and all are in a lot of discussion, but let's not go towards tariff. But in general, I mean, the global trend is, I mean, the US policy change, specifically their stance towards sustainability and all, it is trying to like slow down the pace of global decarbonization, and the momentum is kind of slowing down. So how do you see that affecting, efforts, global efforts as well as regional efforts? And what does it mean for companies like, Axiata and CelcomDigi who are in the ICT and the telecom sector?
So I think it's definitely a very uncertain time that we are in. I think we can all agree to that. It also remains to be seen how this all pans out. Does this also mean more countries join in pulling themselves out of the Paris Agreement? What does that mean for everybody in the short or the near term? I think only time will tell. It's hard for anybody to speculate. But having said that, personally, I think climate risks and risk is staring at us on the face, right? Today, when you talk to a common layman, he understands what climate is doing. There's so much that's happening because of heat waves, floods, droughts. It's not theoretical at all any longer. It's practical. It's happening to us every year and it's getting more severe. And therefore, if the Paris Climate Agreement doesn't remain or starts to lose its momentum, which is likely, I'm sure the other countries will have to come together to form something else as a new initiative to take stock and to have swifter action. Because climate risk is not going anywhere. Whether some country pulls out of it or not, that will remain and that will keep going on. It's not even a question of our future generations any longer. It's almost a question of our generation because it's that immediate and it's already hit us. So yes, it's uncertain, but it remains to be seen how this all pans out.
Thanks, Shohinee. Anything to add?
Yeah,
Philip?
I'll just jump on 2 points. So while it's regrettable that's happening, but I think at the same time, there are things that we can still do, right? So investing in your own data architecture. So it's good that the IFRS is coming, right? Because right now we realize, the example, when you talk to suppliers, when you talk to your supply chain, not everyone is speaking the same language, right? And as that happens on that side of the world, on this side of the world, we can start building that common language. Because at the end of the day, as you can see, Scope 3, you need your suppliers on board. And unless we start speaking in the same lingo, we won't move forward. The other thing that, again, we feel that these few years, either a 4-year, 8-year term, what's possible is to start building future talents. So in CelcomDigi, we have a pre-planned, we have a 10, 100, 1,000, we call it, right? So we are looking for 10 future C-levels, right? We're looking for 100 senior managers, but we're looking for 1,000, we call next-gen talents, right? These are people who, when we hire, it's already looking at people who are invested in next-generation technology. So that when this thing comes back, let's say after 4 years, when Mr. Trump goes down, right, or something else, you have actually talents who are ready for the opportunity. When the world reopens and all the climate technology comes out, do you have enough engineers and data analysts and all those to run it for your company, right? So it's a long tail game at the end of the game for climate. So the preparation is actually the time.
Thank you, Philip and Shohinee. And I feel the tariff thing, actually, it might be a blessing in disguise, especially for the circular economy. If every country starts to, source locally, be more self-dependent, we might be seeing circular economy in action. But this is much more complicated than just the carbon. I mean, we are talking about economics and all at scale that will be impacted. So, yeah, no stance on that. But yeah, moving on to the keeping on to our carbon discussions. So, I mean, science-based targets is something which is, pretty common in your sector and in general in decarbonization. So, Axiata has successfully validated its net zero targets through SBTi, and Celcom is preparing for validation. What has been the biggest surprise or roadblocks in that process? And I understand there are only few companies in Malaysia who have actually successfully got their net zero targets validated. I think you're one of the first one, and hopefully soon it will be CelcomDigi as well. So if you can share, what were the challenges or roadblocks or surprises in that process?
So Scope 3, as we all know, is immensely complicated, right? It's not as straightforward as Scope 1 and 2 is. And together with the complexity, what further makes it difficult is the authenticity and accuracy of data which is required in the computations. Now, the Scope 3 journey, I think, is a always evolving one. You start at a base level, and then you keep going up the ladder, improvising on your data. But the biggest challenge that we remember having faced is awareness. because you need to reach out to divisions which is much beyond sustainability, right? So Axiata as a group, we have operations in several countries, as you know, in South Asia and Southeast Asia. The sustainability department gets it. You speak to them about Scope 3, they know what it is. But this is not just the job of one department. You start to speak with finance, you start to speak with technology, procurement, HR, administration, facilities. You start to touch upon a whole host of new people who've never understood or heard of Scope 1, Scope 2, or Scope 3, and they don't understand why this is even required. And so you're basically trying to appeal to their time, because they have limited time and they all have BAU jobs to take care of. So you're trying to catch their mind and their attention in providing you with the kind of data which is accurate, authentic, for a purpose which is of a much larger, which has a much larger mission, for example, right? So that part, data and the awareness, I thought were the biggest challenges. But again, with every challenge in life, I think the beauty of having done Scope 3 validation is suddenly within a year, so many new people understand what Scope 3 is. And that could have happened only because of us having gone through the rigor, right? Just as you go through the rigor, you come out a much more polished individual. Similarly, I think the organization went through that rigor. So many different people came on board, understood what it is. So now when we are trying to refresh our Scope 3 numbers, let's say for 2023, 2024, there is a lot more awareness that we already, sense. And that's wonderful to see. But the first time is, of course, always difficult. Yeah.
The key is to start, basically.
Definitely,
don't
definitely
like
start.
Be stuck thinking, oh, when I'll have perfect data, I'll start. So
Absolutely, be brave, restart, and just take the plunge and get it going. I mean, you might not have the perfect version of a Scope 3 baseline, for example. It might be mostly spend-based to start with, and it gradually evolves over time. But that's still a start.
Yep.
So a start is better than, some action is better than no action, yeah.
Right, exactly. Philip, you're currently undergoing Scope 3 calculations, Your views.
So I think you're in luck today because you have the before version and after version. Right? So I guess, again, we thank you, Axiata, for paving the path. So we're learning from we're copying their success and learning from their mistakes, in a sense, right? But for us, I think what's important is basically, like she rightly pointed out, getting other departments. So every year we have an ESG day, right? So it's a mandatory learning, because at least different departments now kind of understand what's this ESG acronym about, right? So that's one way we're moving forward. And definitely having a board and management on board is extremely important. So for us, it's also, I don't know whether it's pure luck that the new Bursa chairman is also on our board member. So I don't know whether my job is getting easier or harder. So that remains to be seen. But again, working with credible people, so we are working with Carbon Trust. We are using a platform that's AI enabled. So hopefully this allows for the journey to be more smooth. Because we do believe that at the end of the day, until you know your baseline, you don't know where you're going, right? So that's where we are.
And Philip, if we stick to the SBTi question, because you have to get it validated pretty soon. So how are you ensuring that your upcoming SBTi targets are aligned with the global best practices and remain credible? Probably, we go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, you can answer that question for me. So again, working with credible organizations, and of course, Scope 1 and Scope 2, we've always done our assurance. And as you know, slowly in the next few years, all of us will have to move from limited assurance to reasonable assurance, right? So having platforms, and I think one thing that we're learning is that having institutional memory is very important in order to be credible. You cannot, just because you have a change of guard, change of management, or change of people, your data is lost, your principles and your policies are changing. So I think right now, as we are paving the foundation, not only are we looking at data, we're actually looking at policies and how do you do a midterm and a long-term strategy.
And I guess your annual reports are going to be published soon, and we will have more updates on the things that you are sharing in this session. Great. All right, moving on to the next segment, which is about, Scope 1 and 2 decarbonization, and moving away from commitment to actual action of decarbonization. So, both CelcomDigi, Axiata have committed to net zero. What are some of the most difficult aspects of reducing your Scope 1 and 2 emissions? So we'll come to Scope 3, but difficulties in reducing your scope 1 and 2, if you want to share on that.
I think scope 2 is, of course, the biggest chunk for us, right? Around 85 to 90% for Axiata as a group comes from scope 2. And the challenge is to understand how to reduce that, while on the other hand, you're also expanding your networks, right? And you're moving to an era where you're going to high-speed networks, which may be more energy efficient on a per unit basis, but generally overall, they need denser infrastructure and they need a lot more energy to power those sites, right? So the minute you start moving from 4G to 5G and onwards, the need for energy and therefore the energy guzzling, for example, is so much more. And as a profit-making entity, you would also want to expand your network and be competitive in whichever country you are operating in. So to find that balance, that how do you continue rollout while trying to reduce a scope 2, for example, that's the real challenge. And I'm not addressing scope 1 because that's much smaller, right? And that's actually been going down for Axiata as a group. And we do assure these numbers on a yearly basis. So on a yearly basis, we are seeing scope 1 go down, which is the good news. But scope 2 is where we struggle. And that, I think, will remain. But there are ways around it because there is the link of energy. The minute you link anything with cost saving, right, or cost optimization, I think the ecosystem within the organization gets it, right? Your finance community will get it. Your CFOs will understand it immediately. So I think the real go-to place is to attack these low-hanging fruits first. How can you make a more energy-efficient network while also saving cost? And those can be addressed immediately. And therefore, those don't really have too much of a resistance from within the organization. And that's where you get a lot of support from technology teams, from your finance teams, everybody.
So the key is to start with low-hanging fruits, which is typically like energy efficiency measures, because they have already a business case and payback periods are very short payback periods. All right.
You don't have to, find other ways to justify
Correct.
why you need the fund.
Correct.
It's a straight no-brainer,
Exactly.
and therefore it's immediately picked up.
Correct. Whereas for the other solutions, you might have to take a long-term thinking and what are the, risk exposure, price exposure in the future. Maybe Philip, I would like to hear from you on the same point as well.
So scope 2 is a headache. So example, last year our energy consumption went down, but our carbon emissions went up, right? And the reason is because the national grid emissions factor went up, right? So we need to, again, I think discussions like this and conferences like this is where we signal to the government, while the private sector is doing a lot to try to bring down our energy consumption, it's being contra off because the national grid is not getting cleaner, right? And that's the fact, right? So having that signaling between government as well as the private sector is extremely important, I felt. But like we also mentioned, there's also low-hanging fruit. So one of the things we've done is we've got a centralized organizing AI network now. That means our towers actually can go to sleep in the middle of the night when no one is using, just like a lift, right? So that technology is available and we've actually rolled it out across our networks. The problem is that Malaysians are not asleep at night, right? So again, it goes back to consumer behavior. And I think it was yesterday, one of the panelists was saying, no, if you go any other country by 10 o'clock, the city is dark. But Malaysia at 10 o'clock, people start going to mama and the lights all come up, right? So changing that consumer behavior on using energy, I think is extremely important also, right? Does your phone has to be on 24 hours even when you're sleeping, right? Does it have to refresh or backup? So I was just thinking about circularity also earlier. We are becoming an aging society. So as I think of my parents, my mom has a smartphone, but she's probably using only 3 functions on the phone, right? So do you really need to use so much resources to build a phone when they're actually looking at a few functions? So I think customizing services and products in the future is probably one way to go to meet consumer behavior.
Thanks, Philip, for linking it to the circularity as well, how it can be. And the consumer behavior is so crucial for decarbonizing scope 2 as well. Now let's go into like the scope 3 and the supply chain challenges as well. So Axiata has completed scope 3, as you mentioned, Shohinee, a while ago, and Celcom is in progress. But I mean, if you can share some of the specific scope 3, challenges and how you overcome them as well. So I think you have covered a bit. If you can expand a bit on the scope 3.
Yes, I have. I think, like I said, data
Yep,
and
yep,
awareness.
yep.
And basically a capacity building endeavor, right? You build a capacity across the organization. It doesn't happen overnight. You can't say that today I'm going to get on a call, 50 people will join, they'll understand scope 3, and tomorrow, boom, everything will be in place. No, it doesn't work like that. It takes several months, and I think it's an iterative process. It perhaps may take a few years. For Group 1 companies, what's getting more and more complicated is, and I think it's a positive sign, but it's complicated because it's the first time. With NSRF, Scope 3 is something we need to start looking at assuring in a few years' time. And although it may feel like, there's a lot of time, actually there isn't. By 2027, if you need to reasonably assure Scope 3, then it's an enormous task. Because just having assured Scope 1 and Scope 2, which we've been doing every year, I see the rigor that goes behind that. Scope 3, I can't even begin to imagine where it's going to lead. So I think capacity building, it's the first and foremost, and also getting your stakeholders, everybody aligned. And by stakeholders, I mean the board, the management, senior leaders, heads of departments. Across the organization, there has to be almost a common theme that people understand, because the kind of support one would need to get these things rolling is enormous. You need support right at the top on a daily basis. And you need that, top and bottom, all kinds of push to get this whole journey going. I think for Axiata, we have a very supportive board that's really worked for us. We have a board dedicated to sustainability with the main Axiata board members in it. So the discussion there is only about sustainability initiatives, and carbon and emissions is a very important part of it. So when you get that support right at the board level, and also our CEO is very supportive, we also now have KPIs. I think metrics and targets start to become very important. Metrics and targets right at the senior level need to be there, right? There has to be some assignment, even if that's a 10% or a 5% or 15% to begin with, but some place for an ESG KPI for extremely senior management members is very important. Because that's how you ensure the skin in the game, and that's how all the departments, kind of play ball and work together.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we are observing as well. More and more companies are kind of, linking the executive remuneration with the KPIs linked to decarbonization and sustainability. Yeah, that's a trend that we are observing as well.
Those have to then have a combination. There's some which are annual in nature, and then there's some which have to be long-term in nature. Because what you sign up for, so validation is just the tip of the iceberg. There isn't much to celebrate when one gets validated. It's actually the road from here that's uphill, because now you have a path, you've made a commitment, and you must therefore adhere to it. And so those metrics and targets need to have an annual basis and also a very long-term basis, so that you're constantly viewing something in the short term, but you're also maintaining that long-term horizon.
And not forgetting about the monthly as well, like quarterly progress as well, which ultimately, as a lot of time I've seen, sustainability teams starting to do things right at the Q4 of the financial year. Ideally, it's like every month, if you are preparing for your year-end report, end of the year will be much easier for you. But Philip, I'd like to hear the same from you as well on Scope 3 and the challenges.
So maybe I will jump to the question that talks about suppliers. Again, Scope 3, your major categories is your CapEx and OpEx spend, right? So when our team was looking at it, it was a 700-pager Excel of all the things that we spend in the baseline year. Right? So we were looking at the list and said, how do you do this, right? And so it's a huge exercise, definitely. So internally being able to understand it. So some things when we buy, we have also no idea what we buy. So I liken it to like going into my teenager's room where everything is everywhere. And then you're trying to figure out what goes where. And then you realize, oh, I didn't even know that we bought this, right? So things like that. So it's a good inventory and stock take, I think, for the company. Then we started talking to some key suppliers. And I think that's the moment when the word just transition actually made a lot of sense for me, right? Yeah, big suppliers like AWS or Microsoft and all those, they send you the right people to talk to. There are also medium suppliers where we had meeting and the person was staring at me for half an hour, right? He had no idea what I'm talking about, right? So we realized that it's really a long journey, right? And you would have people who are able to even help you. So like AWS and Azure, they are all on renewables already, right? whereas there are a lot of other suppliers who have no idea where to go. Right? So it's a journey that I guess we are prepared for, and it's exciting to a certain extent.
I think you covered it earlier, what is at stake for businesses who don't move fast enough. So a recommendation to all those, your supply chain and value chain, will be to move faster if they want to capitalize on the opportunities and need to mitigate the risks that are coming in future. All right, let's stay on the scope 3 and the supply chain. So specifically, for Axiata, how you're engaging with the suppliers to improve their scope 3 data accuracy and also actively drive the emissions reduction down through your suppliers here.
So we do. So when we first did our baseline, we used a lot of spend-based data, right? And now we're trying to evolve into more product level disclosure and calculations, for example. So the first thing to do is to engage with your suppliers, at least your top 50 or top 30 suppliers. And those are easy to identify because I think we all know who those suppliers are. To engage with them in a timely and a recurring manner, and to have perhaps forums with them. So, for example, Axiata had one forum I think in September last year, when we brought together all our key suppliers and had a very open, similar like this panel discussion. Where a lot of exchanges of ideas took place, right? And I think these discussions are extremely important because we only learn better from one another. So those forums, those constant dialogues, those discussions, and that's when we realized that we can move to a product level, categorization of, let's say, our capex, because many of our suppliers do have a product level emission factor, for example, which can be applied. And so then that means one can go into much more refined scope 3 numbers. A spend-based is a good way to start, but that's not the perfect way. So to perfect those things, you need to have a lot more engagement with your supply chain, which we've been fortunate to have had done, and I hope we can make it a constant endeavor. Yeah.
Thanks, Shohinee. Philip, if I have to ask you from your perspective, should supplier decarbonization be voluntary? Or would you make a stronger contractual obligation to them? And maybe something like an internal carbon pricing that can help you in deciding which supplier to work with?
I think for us it's a phased approach. I don't think we can do mandatory at this point. But one of the things we've actually learned during this our own journey, because when we talk to a lot of suppliers, the first question they ask is that, who should I send to your meeting? Because I have no sustainability function in my company, right? And of course, every now and then they send all the wrong people. But we started realizing the person that we can start with is actually the health and safety officer, right? Because health and safety is quite mature in the telco industry, because they climb towers and all those, right? And if you remember, it used to be called HSE, right? The E is silent lah, just like English language, right? But we realized that these people understand governance. These people understand data collection, importance of reporting upwards and downwards, right? So when we talk to H&S officers, although E is very new to them, but we realize it's easier to get across, rather than you send me your key account manager who's trying to cross-sell and upsell me another thing, right? So those are lessons we are learning in our journey.
That's a very, very good point, Philip. Like, if you don't find anyone suitable in your supplier who to reach out to, from practical experience, Philip is sharing it's the HSC department representative who might be able to answer your questions. So not the account managers, but the HSC person is your go-to person to get your data from the suppliers. Great. All right. Moving on to something about, we were talking about multiple stakeholders are required, so something on policy, regulations, and industry collaboration. So what policy interventions or incentives would help telecom operators like you to decarbonize faster? So if Shohinee, if you would like to go first.
I think governments do have a very, very big role to play. They have to almost lead by example. So for example, in Malaysia, I think the NETR, the National Energy Transition Roadmap, the commitments are very ambitious to move from, let's say, 30% renewables contribution in 2025 to almost 70%, if I'm not wrong, by 2050. So that's a very ambitious target set forth by the government. So that's a very good start. And I think Malaysia has really pioneered in that area from the region. But having said that, there's a lot of support that government can provide to the private sector and the public sector. This can be in the form of incentives, tax credits, subsidies, and general funding towards research and development as a whole in this particular space. Because moving into renewables is not that easy. It's sometimes not always very cost effective also. So the initial start has to have that nudge which comes from the government. And of course the grid, as the grid starts to become greener, then it starts to benefit everybody far and wide. So policymakers have a very, very big role to play. And I think as corporations, we have a big role to play as well, because we, during our engagements with one another, we learn from one another and we can still influence. We play a very, very large role in influencing, in doing that advocacy, and making ourselves heard. If many corporations get together across sector, I think when we talk about decarbonization, it's really not telco versus pharma or anything else. It's everybody together. But everybody together, they make a pitch and influence the government bodies and the policymakers, then that's a louder hearing that the government will take note of.
Thank you very much, Shohinee, for highlighting the point. Like, decarbonization is a challenge not just for ICT, but across the sector. So more of different sectors come together and start influencing government. I think the grid should start to decarbonize faster. There will be more, investment in the R&Ds and all, which is required for decarbonization. But Philip, I want to hear your views on the policy regulation and the industry collaboration.
Yeah, so same with Shohinee. I'm just going to dovetail on the point. So example, one of the projects we have is with Petronas Kasawari, right? So Kasawari Petronas is a offshore and it's a carbon capture utilization, right? They're trying to do that. So where we came in is that we spoke to them and said, we'll provide you the technology to connect your offshore to internet, and then you can have all your clever gadgets and smart stuff, right? So in the sense that we are building friendships with people who are going in that space, enabling them, hoping that also in the future they can enable us, right? So same thing, we're talking to a lot of forestry or timber or different companies to give them technology so that it improves their yield and production. Because sooner or later, those would be biodiversity, those would be carbon credits and all those. So building that friendships at this point is where we are trying to, right? Because right now, for outside, there's, if you're talking about the government and national grid, there's not a lot of things you can do except for just advocate and lobby. But while you wait for that point, you can start building your own ecosystem.
Very good point, Philip, on how ICT sector is enabling like agriculture sector and forestry sector to decarbonize as well by providing the IoT solutions and other solutions as well. And a bit more deep dive, Shohinee, with you, if how can industry coalitions and cross-sector partnerships, if you can give some examples on that for driving telco sector decarbonization?
I think exchange of knowledge and ideas is key in this area because it's relatively new. Everyone's learning from one another. Every time I hear someone speak, I pick up on something new. So the environment is so fast changing. The landscape is so fast changing. It's sometimes not possible to keep yourself updated every single day. And I think as human beings, we learn fastest when we hear from somebody else, right? You might not always be able to download a report somewhere and read it start to finish. But if you have a friendly colleague or a good network of similar-minded professionals who you could just call upon and exchange ideas, that has a lot more impact than anything else. So exchange of ideas, be part of larger collisions. For telco, for example, GSMA plays a very vital role. Axiata is a member as part of their climate action task force. We do participate regularly in their roundtables and their conferences. So that's just you can have across industry coalitions and you can also have sector-specific groupings. But I think that expert knowledge sharing, learning from one another and kind of, I think this is the beauty of this is that here, I've often seen when sustainability professionals come together, there's very little competition. It's a very healthy environment because everyone wants to share what they've done better and take someone along with them. So I think that healthy approach, also when it comes to climate action and decarbonization, really goes a long way.
Thank you, Anna. National Climate Governance Summit is providing that platform actually to bring like-minded people, all of us together. And if you look at this panel discussion, although you might be competitors, but you are together and driving decarbonization as well. So it's really good to see everyone coming together and working on this agenda. All right, so if we move on to the next segment, which is, I think we have touched a bit the role of grid in the decarbonization actually. So how important is the decarbonization of the grid for telecom companies' own decarbonization strategies? So maybe, yeah, Philip, if you would like to start.
So when it comes to decarbonization of the grid, like we said, it's a huge challenge, right? It's beyond your industry or your corporate. So our CEO has met with the CEO of TMB, you know, and the discussion is that, so how can we move forward together, right? So some of the ideas, while they also path out their own roadmap, is to look at opportunities, smart metering. So we are doing PUE together with TMB, right? The power usage. So learning from one another. So at the end of the day, when you decarbonize, for us, it's not just renewables. It's also about batteries. It's also about the innovation in solar. It's also about the accessibility, right? So there's many things in play. And sometimes we realize that as we are talking to the state government for all our towers, TMB is also talking to the state government for all their power lines, right? So there's a lot of synergy when you get like-minded people with the same ambition and the same pathway. So it's good to seek out people with the same net zero target and see that can we go and talk to the same challenges, people and all those, to try to find solutions in scale. I think that's one way of doing it.
Hopefully our discussions and your sharing of the thought is encouraging other corporates to set ambitious net zero targets and start to decarbonize your own operations in the supply chain as well. But sticking on the same point, Shohinee, if you would like to share about, how important is it to decarbonize, grid and for your own decarbonization?
Extremely important. Like I said, scope 2 is where the massive chunk of our emissions come from. So if that were to improve, for example, so there are two ways of it improving. Of course, the grid gets greener, and then we consume less, right? So we consume less part is the first low-hanging fruit is areas which have economic sense also, which make economic sense to the finance community, for example, within the organization. Those get addressed first. So examples within the Axiata group is in for example, one of our opcos in Indonesia. And also I think Sri Lanka has done this dialogue, indoor to outdoor sites, for example. You move your sites from indoor to outdoor, and that instantly reduces your cooling requirements by a significant amount. Then Smart in Cambodia, for example, did something called IDMU, which is Intelligent Data Management Units, which basically means when you have a low capacity site or low capacity use of a particular cell, then it gets shut down automatically. And then your network is managed, the traffic is kind of reoriented. So you're not guzzling as much energy as before. So these are initiatives, and also batteries, for example, like you had earlier pointed out. Robi, one of our operators in Bangladesh, you have to see whether are you moving into lithium-ion batteries, are you moving into something which is more efficient, long-lasting, etc. So it's a combination. So first is the grid, which the government plays a very big role in, and then what can we do to consume less? And when we are saying what can we do to consume less, which one makes more economic benefit for the organization, address those first.
Thank you, Shohinee. And maybe on the same role of grid, but apart from grid decarbonization, what are the other proactive efforts will be required for telecom? I think, Shohinee, probably you have already covered that. But Philip, if you would like to share more on that, apart from just, depending on the grid decarbonization, what can be done proactively?
Yeah. So again, we can't foresee the future, right? We don't know whether our carbon, we hope it will go down with 5G and with better efficiencies and all those. But if data demand and no change of behavior, like we said, it might go the other way around, right? So there are other things that needs to be done in that space. So now we are actually doing a lot of things around EV also. So we see that as a pathway also. We also, so if you come to, again, our AI Experience Center, there are 8 verticals that are actively happening. These are not use cases, these are actually already commercialized with a partner, right? So we have smart cities, smart agriculture, basically everything with the word smart in front, right? And we see that as you do this and you enable other companies or other industries, it will come back to you at some point, right? And then, like we said, circularity. At one point, one of the partners that that you're enabling might come back and provide you the solution they're looking for, right? So I think we have to start thinking a bit out of the box, right? You have to retool. You cannot just look at traditional ways of trying to achieve your targets.
Going back to that word enabler, I think telcos as a sector have a very big enabler factor, which I don't know if other sectors have as much of. digital solutions, remote working, IoT, all of this just helps other sectors decarbonize, and that's because of the enablement factor that telco or techco brings to them. So we do have, I mean, in addition to what we are doing for ourselves, we also have a great responsibility and a larger role to play for the communities.
I mean, that's what we call like avoided emissions actually. So that is something how you're helping other sectors and outside of your own value chain to decarbonize as well. Yeah. All right, so coming at the final segment, which is, recommendation for other companies. So what would be your advice, to companies in the tech ICT sector and other sectors as well who are just starting their decarbonization journey? So what will be your advice to them? Yeah, Philip, you want to start? No. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess, again, a lot of things, but I would just fall back to my initial point. If you are planning for the future, you need future talents, right? So again, I don't know whether your company is investing in looking for future talents. CelcomDigi, we are working with 40 universities at this point on the Metaversity program. And it's, if you look at it on a surface level, it seems that we are the ones giving money, because universities will always tell you we have no grants, we have no money, right? But on the other hand, the main reason we're doing this is that we're looking out for future talents, right? Because we know that as we move down technology, our retiring engineers won't have the capacity or the ability to jump on board. So maybe that's where you should look at.
Add one point to that. Within the organization, I think, talk about it. Bring that awareness. Don't be shy. Reach out to other divisions. Find those champions in other divisions who you can almost identify as sustainability champions. So all the champions of sustainability don't need to be as part of the division of sustainability, right? You need to find a champion in different departments. Every department needs to have one of those. And also get your stakeholders involved, heavily involved, right? From the management to the board to senior leaders. So once you have that traction and once you have that awareness going, and capacity build, constant capacity building. I don't think you can ever say you've done enough. You have to keep going at it. But it's a continuous journey, and doing all of these things, I think, play a huge role in the long run.
Exactly. So I think we are almost there, but maybe we can take some questions from the audience. If you have any questions for Axiata and CelcomDigi.
Thank you, Shohinee and Philip, for the sharing. Yeah. So, Axiata and CelcomDigi are relatively large organizations in Malaysia. So, me coming from a business experience background, here is probably my question is fall into two parts. I see that both of you are head of sustainability in your organizations. So, being the head of sustainability organizations, do the organizations count you as cost center or profit center? Relatively, some of the things that you do will help in the profit side. My second question is also on where Philip was mentioning about H&S officer and Shohinee was mentioning about sustainability champion. Most of the average sector will place their ESG head or sustainability head under the finance or communications. So perhaps you can maybe give your insight of what would be a good place for an average company to put the person who is in charge of the sustainability in the organization. Thank you.
Who would like to?
So I'll take it up from a Axiata group perspective, right? So Axiata as a group has many operations across the region. Where I sit is the corporate center, which is based here in Malaysia. So I think corporate center, by the just sound of it, we would be a cost center for the group as a whole, because we are not really running operations like Philip is in CelcomDigi. But having said that, it is a very important role to have, because from corporate center you drive a lot of group-related initiatives, especially when it comes to decarbonization or sustainability. There's a lot of group-level initiatives, which kind of is what you carry the whole family along with, right? You take all your operating companies together in that journey. So when we did our SBTI validation, for example, it wasn't just for corporate center, it was actually for all of our operating companies from Cambodia to Bangladesh to Indonesia, everything. Going back to your second question, where should these people belong? I think that's also going to start evolving. And the reason I say that is because of the recent, the NSRF, which has been mandated upon Group 1 companies. What we're beginning to see is finance and sustainability have to play a very, very close, coordinated role together, because we are now going into areas of accounting, right? We're going into IFRS S1, S2. So it's very hard to say this is something which only finance will do or only sustainability will do. It won't be that any longer. It's going to have to become a very strong collaborative process. And not just these two functions, strategy and risk, they also play a very important role. So I think going forward, as the landscape evolves, where these people really sit will also start to evolve. I would personally love to see a situation where there are very, very strong champions in the key divisions of the organization, because that just makes it so much easier to drive a large scale or a large horizon, a long horizon activity when you have champions who are actually invested in the whole idea as you are. But yeah, I think it's going to be ever evolving.
CelcomDigi has 2 heads of sustainability, right? So someday if you meet one of my colleagues, her card also say heads of sustainability. She is the profit center, I'm the cost center, right? So because we realized that a lot of things that we've done can be resold as solutions to customers. So again, exploring EVs and all those fall under her agenda. So so in the sense, you see, when we negotiate with solar provider to build solar on our own roofs and buildings, we also building a business partnership joint venture, right? So then we work with them to sell into our customer base, right? So there is both. So both management has seen that it's both an opportunity as well as to mitigate risk, right? On the second question, ESG is a standing agenda on our board. So every 3 months we go in. I say we because I don't go in alone. I go in with actually around 7 or 8 people. So we have head of risk, we have head of governance, head of cybersecurity, privacy, because all this fall under the umbrella of ESG. Right? So, so like you said, it's a time to build that internal workforce or allies in order to win the war.
Any other questions from anyone? I know we are running a bit late, it's 3:15 already. But any last question? Yeah, all right.
Hi, I'm Dennis. So Malaysia launched the Circular Economy Blueprint last year. So how is Axiata and CelcomDigi aligning and embedding its requirements within your business operation and strategy?
Sorry, could you come again? We didn't catch that.
Malaysia launched a Circular Economy Blueprint.
Oh, Circular Economy Blueprint.
So how are you guys actually integrating this within your strategy, operations? And
So our operations in Malaysia are, I think, as an associate company, it's CelcomDigi, and we have a tower company which has operations in Malaysia. So I let Philip answer that because he's closer to the operations part of things.
So I think for circularity for us, the main one is e-waste, right? We have a lot of e-waste. We are looking at a lot of partners we've spoken to, because we know that the extended producer responsibility will kick in within 3 years to 5 years, right? So that's when, same thing, carbon tax in 2 years' time, or actually 2026 supposedly. So again, how do you look at, so which is why right now when we are doing our scope 3 and baselining, we are also starting to start these discussions. Truth be told, it's not something that we've always spoken about, right? It was always at the back burner. But like you said, as these things are being rolled out by the government, we also work with our regulatory department, our government affairs, to see when do we need to start building the roadmap. So one of the things to do is always prioritize. There's so many things to do under sustainability. It's the alphabet soup, right? So which alphabet do you want to tackle first? So I think that's where that exercise is also happening in the company.
And how I can add is, of all the operations that we have in the region, most or all of our opcos have a very strong e-waste circularity, because for us e-waste is the biggest component, the network equipment, for example. So there's a very, very strong initiative in almost all our footprint markets where the whole circularity is very closely monitored. So there are third-party vendors involved. It's part of contracts, So and I also think circularity is beautiful because you also enable the vendor community to extract precious metals. Many a times these network equipment have precious metals which can be extracted. but also what's most important is the collection of it. So e-waste is collected very diligently and disposed in a very circular manner in an operating companies.
Maybe you have to just add one thing. Probably the first step is to start to measure thing, because you can manage something when you start to measure. So both Axiata and Celcom have already started to understand where exactly their emissions are coming from, the waste, what type of waste, and then they will have a roadmap to reduce.
I think, again, Malaysia has made it mandatory. Bursa has made it mandatory for a certain amount of disclosures, right? So waste directed and diverted to disposal are features that we have to publish. This is, again, going to be part of our annual report. So when we publish those numbers, it's obviously not just corporate center. It's all of our operating companies put together in the sum of parts, which means there's a very strong rigor in measuring it, like Prannoy rightly said. So when we measure it, perhaps we don't cover 100% of all the offices in every country, but every year I've been noticing that it's increasing in coverage. The coverage of the boundaries is exponentially increasing year on year.
Thank you. Any last question?
Hello. Hello, my name is Alia from BEM Pembangunan. So my question is about how is the National Telecommunication Regulator approaching sustainability? Because we are talking more about the SEC document of the NSFRS and disclosure term, but I just want to know and intrigue, are there any specific policies or regulation being implemented to drive sustainability in the telecommunication sector? Thank you.
Address that a little bit. I think the minute the SC releases or has released something like an NSRF last year, that covers all sectors, right? So everybody who is a Group 1 company and is public listed must abide by it in a phased manner, of course. I think SC has been very clear in terms of what is expected in 2025 all the way into 2027, and there's a measured and a phased approach to it. But ISSB inherently also has industry-specific metrics within that. So on one hand, as a Group 1 public listed company, we will have to do S1, S2, which means a lot more diligence and rigor when it comes to climate-related risks and opportunities. It's going to be much beyond just literature. It's going to be much beyond just write-ups. It's going to have to become dollars and cents. But as ISSB, naturally, there are also separate industry measures that are already kind of disclosed. So as a telco or ICT player, we will have a certain set of disclosures or metrics which we will have to talk about in our reporting. And I think those industry metrics differ from sector to sector because in some cases, not all metrics are relevant for all sectors. It really depends on the materiality. So that's how I think ISSB captures it.
All the telcos are part of a GSM association. So GSMA again works very closely with ISSB. A lot of standards and all those come out from there. Every year, the GSMA also works on Mobile World Congress. That's when all the telcos go, and also our ministry, communications ministry go. So in the sense that they know the expectations both internationally and nationally. Right? But I must say I'm very pleased that MCMC now has a head of sustainability after many years, right? So we can also see that at least they start seeing that importance and they are putting human capital behind it. So hopefully tomorrow is brighter.
And maybe just to add to that, I was speaking to some of the regulators. They were saying, we don't want to introduce something new that will confuse, corporates even more. There are already so many standards. So the key will be how the regulators are going to align what corporates are already going to do, rather than coming up with something new and like making it complicated. So hopefully we will see more, kind of requirement, but that won't make the life of corporates even more difficult, but maybe just streamline, their disclosures and everything. All right, so I think we already almost 25 minutes late. So thank you very much, Shohinee and Philip, for joining this panel discussion. I'm sure this was very useful, and you will have a lot of takeaway points, and it will encourage you to commit to net zero and start decarbonizing as well. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.